Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. All forms of deterrent measures must be taken against rioters at Jordanian universities, and the law must be implemented forcefully on each and everyone, said Senate Speaker Faisal Al-Fayez, adding that sanctions must be imposed on suspects who stirred riots and violence on campus without any intervention attempt. Al-Fayez was speaking at a meeting of the Parliamentary Education Committee, which discussed recent disturbances at the University of Jordan campus in the presence of the Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research, as well as the University of Jordan president. Senate Speaker Al-Fayez called for the redeployment of security personnel at campus entrances, noting that their presence should ensure law and order and not interfere in the educational process or in student affairs. If the perpetrators are left without strict deterrent measures and not held accountable, such events would have critical consequences, he said. Al-Fayez stressed that military service must be reinstated, especially for university students, proposing that it extends over a 6-month period divided across 3 academic years, where students serve for 2 months each year. Jordan suspended military service in 1992. And over to Syria, and the Syrian army said it has taken control of a second residential district of the rebel-held eastern part of Aleppo city, the Jabal Badaro district. The district is the second to be taken by the Syrian army in 2 days, after the army retook the Hanano residential district from Daesh yesterday. Neither area was heavily populated, but the advance, accompanied by Russian and Syrian airstrikes, is a major victory for the Syrian government. Russian news agencies, cited the defense ministry, said more than 900 civilians, including 119 children, had left Jabal Badaro in the last 24 hours. Elsewhere in the country, Syrian rebels have been handing in their heavy weapons in a town southwest of Damascus as part of a deal they have made with the government to get safe passage to insurgent-controlled areas. Rebels fighting President Bashar al-Assad and his government say the deals are part of a strategy to forcibly displace whole populations from opposition-held areas after years of siege and bombardment. Elsewhere in the country, Daesh terrorists fired a rocket in northern Syria that caused symptoms of chemical gas exposure in Syrian rebels, according to the Turkish military. The attack targeted rebels backed by Turkey who have been besieged Daesh-controlled town Al-Bab as part of Turkey's Euphrates Shield, aimed at keeping Daesh terrorists away from the Turkish border. The rebels were transferred to a hospital in Turkey's border province of Kilis on suspicion of chemical poisoning. Turkish state media later said the analysis by the country's disaster and emergency organization did not detect chemical materials, and the symptoms were regarded as being caused by tear gas-like substance. Meanwhile, a blast ripped through a street in the northern Syrian town of Ar-Rai, believed to be a Daesh suicide bombing. The explosion, caused by a vehicle-borne bomb, caused several casualties and injured 12 people who were taken to a hospital in Turkey. The town of Ar-Rai is 2 kilometers south of Turkey's Kilis border province, is an area under the control of Turkey-backed rebels and was seized from Daesh in Ankara's Euphrates Shield. The rebels have been besieging the Daesh-controlled town of Al-Bab, around 30 kilometers south of Ar-Rai, for the past days as part of the 3-month-old offensive to drive the terrorist group away from the Syrian side of the Turkish border. In Iraq, the Shiite coalition of Hashd al-Sha'bi, or Popular Mobilization Unit, moved closer towards the Daesh-occupied town of Tal Afar, 53 kilometers west of Mosul. Iraqi army and police forces are also part of the offensive, including Sunni and Shiite Turkmen, reflecting the main mix of the town's population. Footage released by Hashd al-Sha'bi showed fighting families being evacuated from front lines as forces prepared to storm some areas of the city from the southwest. Capturing or isolating Tal Afar from Mosul is a key part of the U.S.-backed offensive to take back the terrorist group's last major city stronghold in Iraq by allowing the ground to complete Mosul's encirclement. And over to Kuwait, where opposition are estimated to have won around 20 seats out of 50 in the country's parliamentary election. Most parliament members were replaced in the vote, which analysts say reflects anger at austerity measures meant to curb a budget deficit. State media said 30 new MPs gained seats in the 50-member parliament, including a number of younger men and one woman. With no political parties running for the election, it was difficult to determine precisely how many opposition MPs were elected, but some estimates put the number at between 17 and 24. The parliament was due to run until July next year, but it was dissolved in October due to what the Emir of Kuwait, Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmad Sabah, said were security challenges. The 9 days of mourning have begun in Cuba as Havana faces a future without revolutionary leader Fidel Castro. Castro was cremated less than 24 hours after his death, and his ashes will be taken to different parts of the country. A controversial figure in history, the death of Fidel Castro was met with a mixed emotions of joy and sadness, but the legacy of his revolution is still preserved in a Havana museum. Here's more.
The yacht which brought Fidel Castro and a band of insurgents to launch a revolution in Cuba is kept in a glass case in a Havana museum. The man who supplied the Granma and packed it with weapons was Mexico City gun dealer Antonio del Conde. News of Castro's death came exactly 60 years to the day he and more than 80 armed followers packed into the vessel and set sail from the Mexican city of Tuxpan for Cuba.
Preparamos la expedición en mi barco, en el yate Granma. We prepared
the expedition in my boat, the Granma yacht, he says, and just yesterday in Tuxpan we celebrated the Granma's voyage of 60 years ago. I asked for a round of applause for the commander Fidel Castro. We all stood up and applauded.
Pedí un aplauso por el comandante Fidel Castro. Nos paramos todos y aplaudimos.
Castro and his insurgents, including Che Guevara, reached Cuba a week later, where they were ambushed on arrival. Despite the turn of events, the country's US-backed dictator was overthrown in 1959. Cuba started 9 days of national mourning for Castro, who died on Friday at the age of 90.
Polls have closed and the counting has begun in France as former Prime Ministers François Fillon and Alain Juppé went head-to-head in a runoff vote for France's center-right presidential nomination. Opinion polls showed Fillon, a social conservative with a deep attachment to his Catholic roots, going into the race as the clear favorite, after stunning his centrist challenger with a massive surge in support just before the first round last week. Fillon voted in the 7th district of Paris. Juppé, accompanied by his wife, cast his ballot in Bordeaux, where he is the mayor. The Swiss voted in a referendum to reject a speedy exit from the nation's 5 nuclear power plants as concerns over losing energy independence outweighed safety worries raised by the vote's proponents. The phase-out strategy calls for eventual closure of the Swiss reactors, but without a deadline. Nearly 55% of voters turned down the initiative, with 45% in favor. The vote was part of the Swiss system of direct democracy, giving citizens a final say on important issues. 2 Swiss reactors would have been shut next year, followed by 2 others in 2024 and 2029 had the initiative passed. The Swiss government and industry fought the plan, saying it could have led to blackouts, higher cost, and the loss of energy independence because the country would become more dependent on coal-fired power from neighboring Germany. Back here at home, CARE International launched a 16 days of activism against gender-based violence under the slogan, Empowered Women, Empowered Society. The campaign kicked off under the patronage of European Union envoy to Jordan, Andrea Fontana. The event is held annually across the world. Fontana, in her remarks, acknowledged the kingdom's efforts to support women and to end gender-based violence. CARE International Director Salam Kanaan said the campaign aims at mobilizing society to empower women and put a stop to all forms of violence against them. Gratitude and thankfulness was shown in Thailand to its huge population of monkeys. A buffet of fruits was laid out for the local animals as a thank you for bringing in tourists and helping the local economy. During the annual event known as Monkey Province, the monkeys have the run of the town, climbing over buildings and onto visitors. This report has more.
The monkeys of Lopburi province in Thailand bring local and foreign tourists flocking to the region. So every year the province rewards them with a great big fruity feast. The event, now in its 28th year, went ahead even though the country is still in the one-year mourning period for its king. Organisers say it was toned down as a mark of respect. Tourists who came to see the monkeys tucking in say the animals are mostly friendly, but some less than others.
One bite me yesterday, so I was surprised, but I guess it was just a bit one that was less kind, but the other was really kind and friendly. So.
And what better after a long, satisfying lunch than a nice, relaxing groom? Then it's back to work, clambering onto passing sightseers, doing the job the tourism industry is so grateful for.
Germany's Nico Rosberg celebrated his first Formula One World Championship after finishing runner-up in the 10th Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, won by Mercedes teammate Lewis Hamilton. After all the suspense and expectation, Hamilton chalked up his 10th win of the season and 4th in a row, but was powerless to do anything about the championship outcome despite making every effort. Rosberg only needed to finish in the top 3 to be sure of the title. Defending champ Magnus Carlsen and Sergei Karyakin remain all square after agreeing to a draw in the 11th game of the World Chess Championship. The 25-year-old Carlsen from Norway gained a momentary advantage late, but the 26-year-old Russian managed to escape with defensive moves, and the two agreed to a draw after 34 moves. The draw was the 9th out of 11 games played and gave both players another half point for a total of 5.5 points, each with one scheduled match remaining. And finally, chilly conditions continue in most regions for the rest of tonight, with frost expected to form in the hilly areas, eastern plains and the Badia. Tomorrow, a slight rise in temperature is in the forecast, but it remains relatively cold in most regions and moderate in the Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea. Winds will be southwesterly moderate to brisk, creating dusty conditions in the southern and eastern regions. The Gulf of Aqaba should continue with expected moderate conditions tomorrow, with northerly moderate winds and slightly high seas. And to end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. The Senate Speaker says military service must be reinstated for university students and urges forceful implementation of the law against rioters following recent disturbances on university campus. The Syrian army says it has taken control of a second residential district of the rebel-held eastern part of Aleppo city, the Jabal Badaro district, the second district to be taken in 2 days. And polls close and counting begins in France as former Prime Minister François Fillon and Alain Juppé go head-to-head in a runoff vote for France's center-right presidential nomination. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.